Beneath the vast sky of the desert, where the wind carried whispers of forgotten legends and the earth cracked under the relentless sun, there lived a man known among the people as the lonely Apache. His name had long been unspoken by many, for he was a man of solitude, marked by silence and endurance. Years of battles, both with enemies and with life itself, had carved deep lines into his face, yet his eyes still held a fire that spoke of strength. He owned fertile lands that stretched far into the horizon, lands where corn grew tall, rivers sang quietly through dry valleys, and wild horses roamed free. But though he had everything a man could wish for, he carried within him a hollow emptiness, for he had no heir, no child to inherit his lands, no laughter to echo in his home. The loneliness grew heavier with each passing season, until one day, when fate placed before him a young woman, pure and untested by the world, who came to his lands seeking shelter. She was tired, carrying with her nothing but hope in her eyes. When she looked at him, it was not fear she saw, but a man who bore both the weight of the earth and the silence of the stars. And in that silence, he spoke words that would forever mark their destiny: "I will give you my lands if you give me a son." His voice was steady, carrying neither cruelty nor command, but rather the desperate yearning of a soul that wished to leave behind more than dust. The young woman, who had known hardship and rejection from her own people, did not answer at once. She had dreamed of love, not of bargains. She had imagined a future where her heart would choose freely, not be bound by another's longing. Yet as she looked at the man, she saw not greed, but a deep sorrow hidden in his request. He was not offering her chains but a chance, land, safety, a life where she could belong. Still, her heart trembled. Could she give herself to a man she did not love? Could she carry the weight of such a promise? Her silence stretched like the desert horizon, and the man did not press her, for he knew that to force was to break, and he desired not a prisoner, but someone who would see him as more than the lonely Apache. Days passed. She stayed in his home, watched him rise before dawn to tend to the fields, saw him share food with wandering strangers, and noticed how he spoke gently to the horses, as if they were his kin. Slowly, she began to see not the hardened warrior, but a man whose kindness lived quietly in his actions, hidden from the world that had only ever seen his strength. When she finally spoke, it was not with submission but with a quiet strength of her own. "A child is not a gift to be traded," she said. "It is born of trust, of care, of something that cannot be forced." The Apache looked at her, and for the first time, his eyes softened, not with fire, but with a grief long buried. He bowed his head, ashamed of his words, and whispered, "Then forgive me. I only wished for a legacy to remain when I am gone." But to his surprise, she did not turn away. Instead, she stayed, and in time, a bond formed between them, not of bargain, but of companionship. She began to tend his home, and he, in return, treated her with respect. Their laughter, rare but genuine, began to fill the silence of his house. She told him stories of her childhood, of the dreams she had once believed impossible, and he listened, as though her words were precious jewels. Seasons turned, and though they were bound by no marriage, no vow, they became as family. The villagers, who had once whispered about the lonely Apache and the virgin girl who lived with him, began to see something greater unfold: two souls, scarred in different ways, healing together. Then one spring, when the earth was alive with blossoms and the rivers swelled with fresh rain, the young woman discovered she was with child. She trembled with both fear and joy, for though she had not given her consent to the old bargain, the child growing within her was not born of duty but of choice, of a love that had quietly blossomed between them. When she told him, the Apache wept. Not the tears of a warrior, but of a man whose heart had carried too much emptiness for too long. He placed his hand gently on her belly and whispered, "This child is not my heir because of blood alone. This child is my heir because of love." But life, as it often does, tested them. A drought struck the land. Crops withered, rivers thinned, and hunger haunted the village. Some people, jealous of the Apache's lands, began to whisper again, saying he had cursed himself by bringing in a stranger. Others demanded that he give up his stores of grain to those who had shunned him before. The young woman watched as her partner, once proud and solitary, gave away his last reserves to feed the hungry, leaving little for themselves. She feared for their child, for their future, but she also saw the truth: generosity was the legacy he wanted to leave, more than wealth or land. The villagers, shamed by his sacrifice, began to rally around him. Together, they dug deeper wells, shared what little they had, and worked side by side to survive the drought. When the child was finally born, the entire village gathered to celebrate. No longer was the Apache lonely, for now he had a family, a community, and a son whose first cry echoed like hope across the desert. The man who had once offered his lands in exchange for a child now realized that life's greatest treasures could never be bought, they could only be given freely, nurtured by love, sacrifice, and trust. And the young woman, who had once feared she would never belong, found herself embraced not only by the Apache but by an entire people who now called her sister. She looked into her child's eyes and saw the promise of a future where kindness and compassion could transform even the harshest desert into a place of life. Years later, when the Apache grew old and his hair turned white, he would sit with his son beneath the same vast sky and tell him the story of how he once believed he had to bargain for love, but instead learned that true love was never taken, only shared. And his son, growing strong and wise, would carry that lesson into his own life, ensuring that the legacy of the lonely Apache was not only land but a living spirit of generosity. And so, what began as a desperate plea ended as a story of transformation, proving that even in the most barren deserts of life, compassion can make flowers bloom. For in the end, it was not land or blood that mattered most, but the simple truth that love freely given is the richest inheritance one can leave behind.